Let's get good. This is our 2,000 subscriber celebration video. We're going to be doing a quick Q&A and a year in review for 2019 as a whole in the world of gaming. This should be absolutely awesome. We're going to start off with the question of what is my favorite strategy game? Now, I was asked this with the sort of inclination of like grand strategy games of Europa Universalis, things like that. I actually don't really get into those games because the systems in them are so complex that it takes a lot of time to learn them just to be able to function in them. And I don't have that much time because of all the work I do on the channel. So stuff like Endless Space and Endless Legend, they're just the right level of abstraction for me for them to be enjoyable and learnable. And I mean, you guys still see me stumble my way through that. So can you imagine if I tried doing something like Europa Universalis? That being said, I do play a little bit of Stellaris here and there. It's not my favorite thing in the world, though. And if I had to go back and look at the strategy game that really got me into strategy games, the one that sold me on the whole kind of genre, it would probably be the original StarCraft. The original StarCraft to me was a mind-blowing experience. It was just so much fun. And it was such an interesting story between these three different alien races that you could kind of identify with on some level, all three of them. So it was just an amazing story, an amazing game. And that's what really got me into strategy as a genre. Before that, I played pretty much entirely RPGs. We're going to get there, though, because that's our second question, sort of. The second question I'm going to be answering is, where does the name Gamerunderdevelopment come from, and the name good? So when I started this channel in 2014, as a person, I was going through some very big changes, at least sort of ideological changes, right? So I grew up playing video games from the time I was 5 years old. I grew up playing Mario. I played all sorts of stuff. About the time I was 6 or 7, I went to rent Ren and Stimpy from the Blockbuster. Those things still existed back then, guys. That's how old I am. And they didn't have it, so instead I picked up Final Fantasy III US. It's 6 in Japan. Anyways, that game blew my mind, and from there, it was a love affair with RPGs for a very, very long time. I played primarily RPGs and MMORPGs with a few sports games riddled in here and some Tokyo Extreme Racer Zero. That was one of my, like, off-standard picks that I would play a lot. Anyways, I had this sort of mentality that I was a connoisseur of video games, right? I understood what made games great, and story was a big part of that. That's what was actually really cool about Tokyo Extreme Racer, was that there was so much story in this street racing game. So anyways, I had this vision that I understood what the gaming industry was entirely, and that I was at the top of that ladder. I was a hardcore gamer, a true connoisseur of the industry, and story was all that mattered. Graphics were just a cheap way to hide a lack of story in most cases. And that may be true for some games. It may be. I also was of the opinion at the time that indie games were sort of these concepts for games that were never actually realized, right? So like, you'd buy an indie game and it would have a really cool premise, but it wouldn't actually be a complete game, and you wouldn't really get your value out of it for that reason. So at the time, my outlook was that indie games would come up with really cool premises, and then AAA games would turn them into full-on games. So I had a very, very negative perspective on indie games at the time. Then I discovered Endless Space and Games Together, and through that, while I wasn't 100% sold on indie games, Endless Space really, really resonated with me. I did get bored with it after a while, but that was because it was before they had put in the event system, and the event system totally breathed life into that game. It was amazing, guys. That's when you really felt the story of it come to life. It was just beautiful. Anyways, long story short, play Endless Space, mess around with some more indie stuff, come back for Endless Legend, and when I played Endless Legend, my mind was gone, right? Like, it completely exploded. And here's why. Because Endless Legend was basically, in my opinion, just a better version of Civ. Being a longtime Civ player at that point, my biggest gripe with Civ was that every faction in it had like 5% differences here and there and one unique unit, and other than that, they basically felt the same. There were a few that were kind of standouts and were very different to play, but the majority of them were all the same, and that wasn't very entertaining to me. Like, I didn't enjoy that very much. So here comes Endless Legend, and they're like, hey, check it out, we've only got 7 factions, but they all play the game completely different. You can actually relearn this game 7 times, and it's different every time. And it blew my mind. It absolutely knocked me on my rear end. It completely changed my perspective on the gaming industry to the point where I stopped myself and said, you know, maybe you've been making some assumptions. Maybe you've assumed a lot of things that were wrong. If you were wrong about something this much, maybe you were wrong about a lot of other things too. So at that point, I really got into YouTube, and I started watching guys like Total Biscuit and guys like Jim Sterling and even guys like Angry Joe. God, what is the Zero Exposure, the escapist guy that did the really funny reviews? I would watch stuff like that, and it started to open my eyes to the bigger gaming industry, right? And I started to feel differently about the gaming industry as a whole, because before that, I'd felt like I was this connoisseur and I was walking into my local game store and I was buying only the things off of the top shelf because that's what a connoisseur does. And it is as arrogant as that, actually. I was a fool back then. Anyways, watching that stuff kind of made me realize that the gaming industry isn't really like that. It's a lot different in that we have a responsibility as gamers, and that is that what we buy will basically inform the industry on what we're willing to buy in the future. So being more choosy about our games and being willing to support games that take some risks is an important idea, because that's how those games get a second shot. So even if you buy in on a game that's taking some really cool risks, and it's not perfect, but it's good, and it's different, that's a good thing, net gain, because now the industry knows, well, you know what? There is actually an appetite for that different thing. Maybe we can polish it up and make it even better. And that's what we want in the gaming industry. If you actually go back and you reference some of my earliest videos here on YouTube, I used to sign off all my videos with, "Until next time, keep gaming responsibly." And that's exactly what I was talking about. Being a gamer in 2020 is not the same as being a gamer in 1985. Being a gamer in 2020 means you have to be very conscious about the way you spend your money and the types of things you'll support and the types of companies you'll support. And this is actually going to come up a little bit later when we get to the year in review. But that all being set aside, I felt, when I was trying to come up with a name for the channel, I felt like my mind had been opened and I had become a gamer under development. I was starting to understand this much bigger picture of what gaming was, and part of that understanding was knowing that as the industry evolves, so does what it means to be a gamer, so we can never actually be done. Like, as long as the industry is still developing, so are we. We don't get to stop developing until the industry just stops developing, and I hope that day never comes, because that would be terrible. We don't want the industry to stop developing. We want it to develop, and we want to help guide that development in a way that is beneficial to our generation and to future generations of gamers, so that they don't get this impression that gaming is all about loot boxes and other wonderfully garbage things that are anti-consumer. So that's where Gamer Underdevelopment comes from. And it's become super important to me as like a personal thing, not just because of its relation to the channel, but like I don't want to stay on this for too long because it's a negative note, and this isn't about negative notes. But the reason I took a break for about a year was because I went through some big life changes, including a divorce. And part of that was going through a phase where I didn't know who I was anymore, because I had always defined myself as this husband and this father. And part of that was gone now, and I didn't know who I was in the wake of that. But being open-minded about the gaming industry, being willing to change my perspective and pivot like that and understand that I didn't know things the way I thought I knew them, actually helped me kind of recover and get through that. It wasn't easy, and I'm not saying it'll ever be easy to recover from a big life change like that, but being open-minded, being willing to understand that you don't know everything and that there's so much more that you can learn, and there's so many people out there you can learn it from, will help you stay on your toes and transition through whatever difficulties you meet in life. And that is what being a gamer under development is all about for me. The name GOOD is just an abbreviation of that, because as cool as the idea of Gamer Under Development is, have you ever tried to type it into a search bar? It's not an easy process. That is a long, long name. GOOD, on the other hand, real short. Gamer Under Dev, sort of shorter. I tried to get the channel to be youtube.com/good, but that was already taken by someone that never posts anything, so I couldn't do that, so it's Gamer Under Dev. Anyways, the point of this whole story is to be open-minded, guys, and definitely be willing to accept that you may have made mistakes in the past, and accept that that's okay, right? Because we have to make mistakes, and that's how we learn. If we can't make mistakes, then we can never learn to be better than we were before. So I don't mind my mistakes, and you shouldn't mind yours either, as long as you treat them as opportunities to be learned from. So that was hopefully not too long-winded. I try to be as brief as possible. I have a habit of going on. We're going to move on now to the 2019 year in review. And as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about that responsibilities in gaming thing, because there's always some complications when it comes to things like that. So we are going to go through my top 5 games in 2019 this is going to be an absolute masterclass in awesome games. There were some really amazing releases in 2019, and some of them, I've actually spoken to people about the list, and some of them aren't amazing in the sense that they're super brand new and nothing you've ever seen before, but they're amazing because they herald back to things that we haven't seen in a very long time and that are worth re-exploring, right? So number one, this is a total breath of fresh air, in my opinion, is Disco Elysium. It's won a bunch of awards this year. There's a reason for that. Disco Elysium is a different kind of RPG. I don't know about you guys, but when I play role-playing games, I have a tendency to literally talk to myself in my head before I make decisions. I think, what would my character do in this situation? Or how do I feel about what this other character in the game is doing to me right now? And how should I react to that? I actually think those thoughts, and I go through that, and I think we all do on some level. Disco Elysium says, forget doing that in your head. Forget doing that on some level. Let's do it in the game. Let's do it in the game, and let's give you some outcomes from doing that in the game. The whole system of internalizing thoughts and things like that, it's just a really brilliant take on what it is to actually play an RPG. It's almost like breaking the fourth wall, but in a really, really intuitive and enjoyable way. So I think Disco Elysium is just the kind of breath of fresh air that we need in the RPG genre, and it's definitely one that is worth putting on your to-get list from 2019.
There is nothing, only warm primordial blackness. Your conscious ferments in it, no larger than a single grain of malt. You don't have to do anything anymore. Ever. Never, ever. Never, ever, ever, baby.
Next up, folks, my number 2 for 2019. And this is my number 2 because I basically sunk hundreds of hours into it this year without even realizing it, because this became my go-to what I play when I actually have 5 minutes free game, and that is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Holy moly, guys. If you loved Castlevania Symphony of the Night, it's more of this, and it's mo better. It's just everything you could want from a Metroidvania type game, and a bag of chips. I freaking love it. There's just so much to do in it. There's so much to explore. The characters are interesting. The story is interesting. The abilities that you acquire are interesting. There's a lot of like rediscovering old areas as you're going through and you unlock new abilities. It is just an absolute romp, and I love it with a passion. The boss fights are fun and compelling. Sorry about that, guys. I had to go let the doggo out because she decided that now was the time to come whine to me to go potty. Anyways, moving forward, back to what I was saying. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is phenomenal. If you enjoy Castlevania or Metroidvanias at all, or if you've never tried one, it is a great game to introduce you to the genre, and it is my number 2 for this year for the sheer number of hours I have enjoyed playing it.
Next time, obey.
Number 3, and number 1 sort of in my heart, because there are some slight technical issues with this game, which is why it didn't get my number 1 slot, but MechWarrior V, oh my, oh my, oh my, oh my, that's all I can say. MechWarrior V is a game that heralds back to one of the first PC games that ever really enamored me with games in general, and that was MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries. I actually played that in a small electronics store down the street from my house, and I would go there after school every day just so I could play it because they had it on one of their display machines, and then eventually that machine sold, and it was like this heart-wrenching thing for me. Fortunately, after that, I started working towards getting my own PC, and the rest is all kind of history. However, it's been about 12 years, if I had to guess, since we got a single-player MechWarrior experience that was really good. I'm not counting MechWarrior 4 because that one was just kind of a flop. It wasn't really what we're looking for in a MechWarrior game, in my opinion. But 5 does it all. 5 has you flying around for missions. You've got all these different mechs to explore. It's just mwah. And it's visually beautiful too. And I know that I said before that visuals are sometimes a way for people to hide a weak story. And there have been people that have complained about the MechWarrior 5 story. But let's be honest. MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries isn't necessarily so much about the story as much as it's about you crafting your own story as a mercenary flying through the inner sphere, doing jobs for whoever will pay you. And in that, it is completely successful. I freaking love it. If you guys enjoy big robot combat games and smashy shoot, then this is a game for you. Right, where's our exfil? Where is our exfil? Can we actually survive this? We're probably dead, guys. I'm not even gonna lie. We're probably dead. I don't think we can survive this at this point, but I'm gonna try. Oh boy. Alright. Let's get vertical here. Next up on the list, and you guys knew this one was coming because there was no way I was gonna skip this, The Outer Worlds. Talk about a journey or a tour de force back to the good old days of the Obsidian RPG. Outer Worlds is an absolute romp, but more importantly than being a romp, it has that one thing that makes RPG games so compelling, and that is great writing. The Outer Worlds writing is absolutely phenomenal. There are interactions that you'll have with the members of your crew that legitimately, if you're open to it, will touch you in an emotional place. And that almost sounded funny saying it, but regardless, I was playing the game at one point, and I was on stream for this, and it was a conversation with Parvati, which you may know, you may not. If you don't, check the game out because she's awesome. Anyways, we were having a very interesting and awkward personal conversation with her, and it really got me, and I dang near cried on stream because it reminded me of conversations like that I had had with my own daughter, and it really felt like that because of how well the writing is done. And it is all voice acted for this stuff too, so that definitely adds to it, but it really pulls you in and it tugs at you as a person. If you wanted to, you can go the complete opposite way and be like an interstellar psychopath that murders everybody in your sight too. At least I hope that's the opposite way and not who you really are. Anyways, it is just beautiful. It's a game that is worth putting in the time to explore and definitely worth the price of admission. I recommend picking it up if you haven't. It is an absolute blast through the galaxy.
Look! I didn't mean what I said about your outfit. It's very fashionable, I swear. Ah!
We gotta get over there, Captain. Maybe they're still alive.
Number 5 on our list this year. This is the only roguelike I am featuring on the list this year, and that is Slay the Spire. Now, Slay the Spire is another game that miraculously ate as much of my free time as I would give it, and that's because Slay the Spire does something a little bit different. If you're out there and you've maybe played Magic the Gathering, or you've played Yu-Gi-Oh, or you've played Hearthstone, or you've played any of these card games, it's kind of like that, only different and in a way better, because instead of just, playing a card game against somebody else, you're literally competing with the game, and the goal is just to build the most broken, off-the-hook, crazy fun thing that you can build, and you can do some truly crazy things. You'll see in the video footage behind me one of the builds that I was able to pull off on a daily run, which is another thing I want to get into. So when you play Magic, or you play Hearthstone, or you play Yu-Gi-Oh, you have sort of limitations. You can have this many cards in your deck, you can have this many copies of a card in your deck. These cards aren't allowed. They're banned, they're restricted, whatever. In Slay the Spire, there is none of that. In fact, they have daily runs where they regularly give you the ability to break the core games of the rules to build something completely crazy and off the hook, and that is something you can sink hours into. When I was recording footage to run in the background of talking about this game, I actually got so sucked in that I ended up playing for like an extra hour after I was done recording like the little bit of background footage I needed, because the run I got on was so good, guys. We had this weird build where we would just stack a ton of armor and then use this ability that would hit damage based on the number of armor you had. So you had super high defenses and you'd also chunk enemies for like 100 damage. Anyways, it's absurd. It's absurd. It's awesome. It's everything in between. Slay the Spire is a great little card game if you're just looking for something to provide you with a momentary distraction and a good bit of out-of-the-box fun. If you're a Timmy, if you're a combo player that just loves to make really crazy jank happen, then this is the game for you. Okay, next up, I want to talk about a change that we're kind of seeing in the gaming industry, as well as a couple of games that really represent that change. And part of that discussion is going to be talking a little bit about that industry and the supporting companies thing that I mentioned earlier. So it's going to be an unavoidable chat, but we'll get there. Anyways, ongoing games, like games that are continuously running, that are free to play, are more and more popular now. And I think the reason why is because people have already sunk all this time in, they already enjoyed the game. And as long as those games are being regularly supported and the commercial side of them are not exploitative, then it really, really does keep people interested and involved. And every time something new comes out for them, I have people message me, hey, good, have you seen the new thing for this? And I'm like, no, I don't play that because I don't have that much time. But it's crazy how many people really love and support these games, right? And now that I've started to explore them a little bit more, they're changing the way that I think about free-to-play games, because for a very long time, free-to-play games just meant that there was some crazy, terrible monetization scheme, right? And it was just a way to kind of trick you into buying a bunch of little crap. But it's not really like that anymore. So we're going to talk about the games that are ongoing in 2019 that had some big updates, made some big changes, and just did some awesome stuff. Number one, this is a personal number one, and this is a controversial number one for a couple of reasons that I can't glance over here, so I'm just going to go into it briefly. Number one is League of Legends, with the release of Teamfight Tactics. Teamfight Tactics is League of Legends auto chess mode. It's incredibly fun. It's easy to pick up. You can kind of just sit down and figure it out as you go, or you can develop a strategy and really, really go into the way that you want to play it. And it supports sort of all of that. It's just a nice, enjoyable way to play the game. League of Legends is a Riot game, and Riot is sort of it's an in-between point for me, right? Because we talk about companies you do and don't want to support. Riot is linked to some of the most toxic toxic communities in history, but I do think that they've done a lot to try to clean those up. More importantly, they just settled a lawsuit where they had to pay a bunch of their female employees because of some internal politics stuff that wasn't very good, and I really, really don't support any of that. However, this is where I'm kind of torn, and this is why it's hard to be a knowledgeable and aware gamer in the industry today. While there is those issues in internal policy and their sort of office politics, you also have to recognize that League of Legends is one of the longest running free-to-play games whose microtransaction policies are purely cosmetic and not exploitative really at all. So when I first started playing League of Legends, the only thing that you could buy for cash that wasn't cosmetic was rune pages, and those are convenience. But now, rune pages can also be bought with the free currency that you earn in-game, so that's not locked out anymore either. The only thing you really spend money on is cosmetics. So for that reason, it is one of the best free-to-play modules that is supportive of the consumer, because you don't have to invest cash money unless you want to. I've been playing the game for like 5 years now, and I've invested a total of like $20. And that was just me being like, you know what, I enjoy this game, I want to support you guys. Plus the arcade boss Vigar skin is 100. It has pixelated graphics, it has 16-bit audio, it's just beautiful. Anyways, that aside, I definitely think League of Legends has done a great job this year in releasing TFT and sort of trying to keep themselves fresh and relevant in every arena. Not to mention the introduction of Riot Forge, where they're going to allow some other companies to build sort of spin-off League of Legends games, because there is a lot of really great lore and story to that world.
They could not.
Next up, number 2 on our list is Warframe, and Warframe has had a myriad of updates this year. Just some really, really incredible stuff. They've, I believe this year, released 2 new planets. They had the Kuvalich expansion, which is sort of like the Nemesis systems from the Middle-earth games recently. They've released the Railjacks, which is a ship fighting system. There's just so much to explore in this game, not to mention this amazingly wide array of different Warframes, which are essentially like characters that you can play as that all have really interesting abilities. I'm still getting into the game. I'm fairly I'm fairly new, sorry about that. And I've seen my friends play around on all sorts of crazy characters. There's a character where you can literally construct a musical beat, and as you use your abilities, that beat plays, and that is super cool. And that's just the beginning. Like, I've seen so many different Warframes and characters that you can kind of play around with and have fun with. The only thing I've seen from their microtransaction stuff really is that you do have to buy new slots if you want to collect more Warframes, but there's also an incentive to not do that because you can always sell the Warframes for currency and then play a new Warframe. If you do want to collect them, though, I think it's fair of them to ask you for a small contribution financially just to be able to keep collecting your Warframes. And they do regular sales of their currency platinum, which you can then use to buy as many slots as you need. So I think that their model is really, really solid, and I think that their game development has been really good this year. So kudos to them. Warframe is absolutely worth you checking out if you're looking for something to play in the long run. Number 3 in 2019's ongoing games is Path of Exile with the latest Metamorph update. Now, I'm still getting into Path of Exile. I actually haven't played it that much. What I do know is that I immediately get vibes of Diablo 2, that's great. That's what I want, because Diablo 3 wasn't it was not good for me. But Diablo 2 was amazing. It really does feel like that. I'm already kind of having fun. Like, I made a character and I wasn't super enjoying it, so I made a different character and now I'm really, really loving it. But the new Metamorph system where you can sort of collect body parts and spawn your own bosses is very cool. And from my understanding, that's just the tip of the iceberg of the development they've done this year. I've heard people talking about it pretty much nonstop all year at various points. It is one of those games where, once again, the cash model is very, very forgiving to a player on a budget, and you can still enjoy and explore the majority of the game without investing very much financially at all. So kudos once again to Path of Exile for being one of those games that falls on my ongoing game recommendation list. Now, I do want to say there are a lot of other games that still fall on this list, but some of them I didn't include for different financial reasons. I'm not going to go into that too much, but I do want you to know there are plenty of other options out there. There's things like Hearthstones, there's things like Magic the Gathering Arena. Ongoing games are doing really, really well right now. Do be cautious of the financial monetization scheme of those games, though. That's one of the reasons why I didn't recommend either of the two that I mentioned before.
The task I've given you is dangerous. To face the cruelty that dwells in the living, distilled and manifested, is not a task I wish upon anyone. Yet it is what I've asked of you. So you may be asking yourself, for what purpose do I seek to isolate this darkness? I once thought it was a symptom of the corruption that pervades Rayclass, but now I believe it to be something more primeval and universal. An element of our very beings hitherto unknown. To better understand it is to better understand life as a whole. Is that not enough? Very well. There is more to the story, but it may take some time.
Anyways, guys, that is my 2019 year in review. I want to take a second to thank all of the Patreons that do support the channel. That being Mark, Marcus, Eli, God, on the spot, Missy, trying to remember everybody on the spot is not working great for me. But anyways, thank you all for your support. Thank you for everybody that subs. Thank you for everybody that Patreons the channel. Thank you for everybody that just hangs around and talks to me or even comments on the videos, because it's super important. Like, when I get up in the morning and there are comments on the videos, that makes me that much more inspired to keep going. if I work for a long time on stuff and things just get real quiet, it makes me wonder if maybe I'm losing relevance or people just aren't enjoying the content anymore. So every one of you who does respond, thank you very, very much. And even if you don't have time to comment, but you just watch and you enjoy the videos, feel free to hit a like button. Let me know that you're enjoying those videos, because that'll let me know that I'm doing the right thing and I don't need to transition the content too much. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.